the prophecy of blood and moonlight, long before the throne of the Lycan kingdom was carved from black stone, before the golden banners of the royal pack ever fluttered above the capital. A prophecy was etched into the temple walls by the first oracle, a seer who gave her life to deliver the vision. The temple stood on the highest peak of the Shadow Mount Range, where the moon's light touched the earth before anywhere else in the kingdom. The walls were made of ancient stone that hummed with power, and upon those walls, written in the blood of the oracle herself, were words that would shape the fate of an entire realm. It spoke of a king born of war and shadow, a ruler who would rise through strength and conquest, whose wolf would be darker than midnight, and whose heart would be harder than the stone of his throne. And it spoke of an Omega born of silence and rejection, a woman overlooked by her own kind, invisible to those who should have cherished her, yet carrying within her a power that could save or destroy kingdoms. The prophecy said, "When the king stands at death's door, the forgotten one will choose life over pride. Her blood will break the poison, her love will tame the beast. Together they will raise 4 heirs, each blessed with gifts beyond measure. But darkness watches and waits, for the heirs will face a trial of shadow and flame. Only when the forgotten rises to her true power will the kingdom know eternal peace or fall to eternal night." For centuries, the prophecy was dismissed as myth, as nothing more than the fevered visions of a dying woman. Kings came and went, each more powerful than the last. Wars were fought and won. Territories expanded. The kingdom grew strong. Omegas were overlooked, traded like commodities, or ignored entirely unless they possessed rare beauty or powerful bloodlines. They were seen as the weakest link in the pack hierarchy, meant only for breeding and service. But fate has a way of waiting in the shadows, patient and relentless, watching every move, every choice, every moment of pride and arrogance. And then, when the time is right, fate strikes. Like lightning, like justice, like destiny itself. This is the story of how a prophecy became reality. This is the story of how an overlooked Omega became a queen. This is the story of blood, moonlight, and a love that would change everything. Before we begin, if you love dark Lycan kings, forbidden mates, and stories that make your heart ache, comment where you are watching from and subscribe for epic Lycan King romances, where Omegas rise, kings fall, and love is never gentle. The overlooked Omega Bella had always known what it meant to be invisible. From the moment she presented as an Omega at the age of 16, she understood that her life would be different from the dreams she'd held as a child. She had imagined finding a mate who would love her, perhaps joining a pack where she could serve with honor, maybe even raising children who would grow strong and proud. But reality, as she quickly learned, was far crueler than childhood dreams. She wasn't weak. She could work from dawn until dusk without complaint. Her hands never idle, her spirit never broken no matter how heavy the burden. She wasn't ugly. Her features were soft and pleasant. Her dark hair fell in gentle waves down her back, and her eyes held a warmth that would have drawn others to her if they had bothered to look. She wasn't cursed. No witch had placed a hex upon her family line. No ancient sin stained her bloodline. No dark magic followed her footsteps. But she was ordinary. Painfully, unremarkably ordinary. In a world where alphas were celebrated as warriors and leaders, where betas ran the pack's daily affairs with efficiency and pride, Omegas were expected to be delicate, desirable, and politically useful. They were meant to be rare treasures, their sweet scents driving alphas wild with desire, their beauty causing conflicts and competitions among the powerful. Bella was none of those things. She had no strong scent that would mark her as special. When alphas passed her in the corridors of the pack house, they didn't pause or inhale deeply or turn with interest in their eyes. They simply walked past as if she were part of the furniture, as invisible as the stone walls themselves. She had no rare bloodline to recommend her. Her parents had been simple pack members. Her father, a beta who worked in the lumber mills. Her mother, an omega who cleaned the great houses of the nobles. They were good people, hardworking and kind, but they had died in a rogue attack when Bella was only 12, leaving her alone in a world that had no patience for orphans with no connections. She had no noble parents to arrange advantageous marriages for her, no wealthy relatives to provide a dowry that might tempt an alpha to overlook her ordinariness. No political connections that would make her valuable despite her lack of other qualities. At pack gatherings, Bella stood quietly by the walls while other omegas were courted and pursued. She watched them laugh and dance, their faces glowing with the attention of alphas who competed for their favor. She saw them whisper and giggle together, sharing secrets about their suitors, comparing the gifts they received, planning their futures with an excitement that seemed to light them from within. While they celebrated, Bella carried trays of food and drink, served the guests with quiet efficiency, and pretended not to notice the pitying looks that occasionally came her way from those who remembered she was there at all. "Poor thing," she heard them whisper when they thought she couldn't hear. No alpha will ever want her." "Such a shame," others would murmur. "Pretty enough, I suppose, but there's just nothing special about her." "She'll probably end up a servant for life," the crueler ones would laugh. "At least she's useful for something." Each word was a small cut, and over the years those cuts had formed scars that Bella carried in silence. But she had learned not to show her pain. She had learned to keep her face neutral, her eyes downcast, her presence as unobtrusive as possible. Better to be invisible than to be mocked. Better to be forgotten than to be ridiculed. Better to serve in silence than to reach for something she could never have. But what no one knew, what no one had ever bothered to discover, was that Bella had gifts that went far beyond the superficial qualities they valued. She listened, not just to the words people spoke, but to the tone beneath them, the truth hidden in hesitation, the lies wrapped in false smiles. She watched, not just the obvious displays of power and performance, but the small gestures, the meaningful glances, the patterns of behavior that revealed true intentions. She remembered everything, every conversation overheard, every secret whispered in corners, every alliance formed in shadowed hallways, every betrayal plotted behind closed doors. In her invisibility, Bella had become the perfect observer. People spoke freely around her because they didn't consider her important enough to guard their words. They revealed their true selves because they didn't think she mattered enough to remember. And that gift, that unexpected, underestimated gift, would one day save the king himself. Bella didn't know it yet as she moved through her days, serving and working and existing in the margins of pack life. She didn't know that destiny had marked her from birth, that the prophecy written in blood centuries ago spoke directly of her, that her very ordinariness was part of a greater plan. She only knew that she survived, one day at a time, holding on to a small, stubborn hope that perhaps someday, somewhere, someone would see her for who she truly was. She didn't dare hope for love. She didn't dream of being chosen. She didn't imagine that her life would ever be more than it was. But fate, as always, had other plans. The Lycan King Caesar was not a gentle ruler, and he made no apologies for it. He was tall, towering over even the largest alphas in his pack, broad-shouldered and built like a warrior who had spent his entire life training for battle. His presence filled any room he entered, a storm barely contained in human skin, power radiating from him in waves that made weaker wolves lower their eyes and bare their throats in submission. His eyes glowed gold when he was angered, which was often, and in those moments, his wolf pressed so close to the surface that those around him could feel its dominance like a physical weight. His hair was dark as midnight, usually tied back to keep it from his face during training or battle, and his features were hard, carved by years of war and responsibility into something both beautiful and terrifying. His wolf was said to be larger than any in the kingdom, a massive black beast with golden eyes that could tear through enemy lines like a scythe through wheat. Those who had seen him in battle spoke of him with a mixture of awe and fear, describing how he moved with impossible speed for something so large, how his howl could freeze the blood of his enemies, how his very presence on the battlefield could turn the tide of war. Caesar had won his throne through strength and blood, fighting his way up from the position of a common warrior to command respect, fear, and eventually the crown itself. The previous king had been weak, corrupt, allowing the kingdom to fall into chaos as rogue pacts terrorized the borders and internal conflicts threatened to tear everything apart. Caesar had challenged him in single combat before the entire pack, and the battle had been brutal and decisive. When it was over, Caesar had stood over the fallen king, blood dripping from his claws, and the pack had howled their acceptance of their new ruler. That had been 5 years ago, and in those 5 years, Caesar had transformed the kingdom. He had driven the rogue packs back beyond the borders, established strong defenses, negotiated treaties with neighboring kingdoms, and brought a stability that the realm hadn't known in decades. Enemies feared him. They whispered his name in the dark and told their children stories of the Lycan King who showed no mercy to those who threatened his people. Allies respected him. They knew that his word was law, that his promises were kept, that his protection was absolute for those who earned it. But Caesar trusted almost no one. His childhood had taught him that lesson well. He had been born to a minor noble family, nothing special, nothing that would have predicted his rise to power. But he had watched his father be betrayed by those he considered friends, seen his mother weep over alliances that crumbled at the first sign of weakness, learned early that power was the only currency that mattered in a world of wolves. So he kept everyone at arm's length. He took lovers when his wolf demanded it, but never let them close to his heart. He listened to advisors but made his own decisions. He walked through his palace surrounded by guards and servants and nobles, yet utterly alone in the ways that mattered. Especially, he did not trust the elders. The royal council of elders had guided the throne for generations, passing their positions down through family lines, accumulating power and influence that sometimes rivaled that of the king himself. They were ancient, wise, and powerful, alphas who had lived through multiple reigns, who remembered when things were done differently, who believed that tradition was more important than progress. And they had supported Caesar's rise to power because they thought they could control him. They had been wrong. Caesar rejected their political marriages, refusing to mate with the carefully selected omegas they paraded before him, each one chosen for her bloodline or her family's influence rather than any true compatibility. The king must think of the kingdom, not his own desires, they would say, their voices dripping with false concern. The king is thinking of the kingdom, Caesar would reply coldly. And the kingdom needs a ruler who makes his own choices, not a puppet dancing on your strings. He ignored their advice on military matters, trusting his own instincts and the council of warriors who had actually fought battles rather than old men who remembered wars from their youth with rose-tinted nostalgia. He ruled by instinct instead of tradition, breaking protocols that had stood for centuries because they no longer served the kingdom's needs, implementing changes that made the elders sputter with outrage. "This is not how things are done," they would protest. "Then it's time things were done differently," Caesar would say, and dismiss them from his presence. The elders smiled to his face and bowed with apparent respect. But behind closed doors, in shadowed chambers where even the walls were sworn to secrecy, they plotted. Quietly at first, just whispers of discontent, suggestions that perhaps the young king was too impulsive, too dismissive of wisdom, too dangerous to be left unchecked. Then slowly those whispers grew into plans, and those plans grew into conspiracy, and that conspiracy would soon grow into assassination. But they underestimated one crucial factor in their careful plotting. They had forgotten that the most dangerous person in any room is the one that everyone overlooks. They had forgotten about the servants who heard everything. They had forgotten about the invisible Omega who carried their wine and listened to their secrets. They had forgotten about Bella, and that forgetting would be their downfall. A feast of silver and lies. The great hall of the royal palace shimmered with candlelight on the night of the king's victory feast. Hundreds of candles burned in silver holders mounted on every wall, their light reflecting off polished armor and fine jewelry, creating an atmosphere of celebration and opulence. The vaulted ceiling soared high above, painted with scenes of ancient pack victories, and the massive fireplace at the far end roared with flames that kept the early autumn chill at bay. It was the night of King Caesar's victory feast, celebrating a successful campaign against the rogue packs of the northern mountains who had been raiding border villages for months. The king had led the campaign himself, and the stories of his ferocity in battle had spread quickly through the kingdom, enhancing his already fearsome reputation. Music filled the air, played by skilled musicians on instruments of wood and string. The melody was triumphant and joyful, designed to match the mood of celebration, though underneath it all ran an undercurrent of something darker that only those with sensitive ears might detect. Wine flowed like rivers, servants moving constantly through the crowd with trays of crystal goblets filled with the finest vintages from the royal cellars. Red wine from the southern vineyards, golden wine from the eastern hills, and the special silver-white wine reserved only for the highest nobles, each bottle worth more than most common wolves earned in a year. The nobility of the realm had gathered for this occasion, knights dressed in their finest clothing, jewelry glittering at throats and wrists and fingers. Alphas wore formal military dress or elaborate traditional robes, displaying their rank and status through every thread. Betas wore the colors of their administrative positions, proud of their roles in keeping the kingdom running smoothly. And Omegas, the rare, valued Omegas who had caught the eye of powerful Alphas, wore gowns of silk and velvet, their hair adorned with flowers or jewels, their scents sweetened with expensive perfumes. The long tables groaned under the weight of the feast. Roasted meats of every kind, from venison to wild boar to specially prepared beef from the kingdom's best herds. Fresh bread still warm from the ovens, vegetables glazed with honey and herbs, fruits arranged in artistic displays, and desserts that were works of art in their own right, all laid out in abundance to demonstrate the kingdom's prosperity under its warrior king. At the high table, elevated on a dais so that everyone in the hall could see him, sat King Caesar himself. He wore black and gold, the royal colors, and his formal crown, a circlet of dark metal set with golden stones that caught the candlelight. He looked every inch the powerful ruler, his expression stern and watchful even in the midst of celebration, his golden eyes scanning the crowd constantly, always alert for threat or deception. To his right and left sat his closest warriors, the Alphas who had fought beside him in the northern campaign. They laughed and drank, their voices booming with the confidence of victory, their toasts growing more elaborate as the night wore on. Bella moved silently among the guests, carrying trays of goblets, weaving through the crowd with practiced ease. She had served at dozens of these events, and she knew exactly how to move to avoid drawing attention. Shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast, steps quiet and careful. She wore the simple gray dress of a palace servant, her hair tied back in a plain braid, nothing about her appearance suggesting she was anything more than part of the background. No one noticed her, which meant she heard everything. She heard the warriors at the lower tables boasting about their exploits, exaggerating their roles in battles, competing for glory in the retelling. She heard the noble ladies gossiping about potential matches, discussing which Alphas were looking for mates, and analyzing the king's continued refusal to choose a Luna with a mixture of frustration and fascination. She heard the merchants discussing trade agreements, the military advisors debating strategy, the younger wolves flirting with increasingly obvious intentions as the wine loosened their inhibitions. but it was near the high table, in a shadowed alcove behind a marble pillar, where she heard the words that would change everything. 2 elders stood there, their gray heads bent close together, their voices low but not quite low enough. Bella had been reaching for empty goblets on a nearby table when she caught the sound of their whispered conversation, and something in their tone, furtive, urgent, dangerous, made her freeze and listen. "Tonight," one whispered. Elder Marcus, she recognized his voice, a thin alpha with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. "The king drinks from the silver cup. Everything is arranged." "And the poison?" the other asked. Elder Lucius, shorter and broader, with gray hair that fell to his shoulders and hands that trembled slightly with age. "You're certain it will work?" "Undetectable," Marcus assured him, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Tasteless, odorless, impossible to distinguish from the wine itself. The alchemist assured me that even the king's enhanced senses won't detect anything wrong until it's far too late." "How long?" Lucius asked, and Bella could hear the mixture of excitement and fear in his voice. "Slow enough that no one will suspect foul play," Marcus replied. "He'll finish the feast, dismiss the guests, perhaps even make it to his chambers before the symptoms begin. By morning he'll be dead, and everyone will believe his heart simply gave out from the stress of battle and kingship. A tragic loss, but not unprecedented for a warrior who pushes himself so hard." "And then?" Lucius pressed. "And then we guide the selection of the next king," Marcus said, and Bella could hear the smile in his voice. "Someone more amenable to traditional wisdom. Someone who understands the importance of respecting those who came before. Someone who will listen to the elders instead of dismissing us like troublesome children." "The prophecy," Lucius began, but Marcus cut him off with a harsh laugh. "The prophecy is a myth, old friend, a story told by a dying woman centuries ago. There is no forgotten Omega who will save the king, no magical bond that will protect him from poison. There is only power, and those wise enough to seize it when the opportunity presents itself." Bella's heart pounded so hard, she thought surely the entire hall must hear it. The tray in her hands trembled slightly, the crystal goblets threatening to clink together and give away her presence. They were going to kill him. They were going to kill the king. Tonight. She should have been afraid, and she was. But beneath the fear ran something stronger, something she couldn't quite name. A sense of wrongness, of injustice, of destiny shifting on its axis. The prophecy. The forgotten one will choose life over pride. Bella had heard the prophecy, of course. Every wolf in the kingdom had heard it at some point, usually dismissed as an old legend with no bearing on reality. She had never imagined it might be about her. Never considered that her own life might be touched by such ancient magic. But in that moment, standing invisible in the shadows while traitors plotted murder, something awakened inside her. A certainty that she couldn't explain, a pull toward action that overrode every instinct that told her to stay safe, stay quiet, stay invisible. The king was in danger, and she was the only one who knew. What she did next would determine not just her own fate, but the fate of the entire kingdom. Bella looked around carefully, making sure no one was watching her, then quickly backed away from the alcove, her mind racing. She needed proof. She needed to know which cup held the poison. She needed to act fast before it was too late. She moved through the crowd, her eyes scanning the high table, watching the servants as they prepared to serve the next course. And there, yes, there it was, a silver cup, set apart from the others, marked with a small golden ribbon around its stem. So subtle that no one would notice unless they were looking for it, but clear enough that the server would know which cup to place before the king. Bella's hands shook as she set down her empty tray and picked up a fresh one. Her mind worked frantically, trying to form a plan. She couldn't just grab the cup. That would cause a scene, and the elders might have backup plans, other poisons, other methods. She needed to warn the king himself, directly, in a way that couldn't be dismissed or intercepted. But how could she, an overlooked Omega servant, gain an audience with the most powerful Alpha in the kingdom? The answer came to her in a flash of desperate clarity. She would take the poisoned cup herself. She would bring it directly to the king. She would force him to listen. It was madness. It could get her killed, either by the king's guards for approaching without permission, or by the elders if they discovered her interference. But the prophecy echoed in her mind. The forgotten one will choose life over pride. Bella had no pride. She had nothing to lose, but the king had everything. And so did the kingdom. Taking a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, Bella moved toward the high table, her eyes fixed on the silver cup with its golden ribbon, her heart pounding with fear and determination. She had lived her entire life invisible. Tonight, she would be seen. Tonight, everything would change. The choice. Bella stood in the corridor outside the feast hall, her back pressed against the cold stone wall, the silver cup clutched in her trembling hands. She had grabbed it during a moment of chaos when a servant had stumbled and dropped a tray of glasses, the sound drawing everyone's attention for precious seconds. In that brief window, Bella had seized the poisoned cup and slipped away, her heart thundering so loudly she was certain someone must hear it. Now, alone in the shadowed corridor, the full weight of what she had done crashed down on her. She could walk away. She could take the cup, pour its contents down a drain somewhere, dispose of the evidence, and return to her invisible life. No one would blame her. No one even knew she existed, really. She could save herself from whatever consequences might come from interfering in the deadly games of the powerful. It would be the smart choice, the safe choice. But something inside her refused to stay silent, refused to let cowardice win, refused to let evil triumph simply because it was easier to look away. She thought of the king, Caesar, the warrior who had brought peace to a kingdom in chaos, who fought to protect his people even when they didn't appreciate his methods, who stood alone against tradition and expectation because he believed in doing what was right rather than what was easy. He was hard, yes. Harsh, even. But he was just. He was strong. And the kingdom needed him far more than it needed the corrupt elders who plotted his death from the shadows. She thought of the prophecy carved into the temple walls, the words she had read years ago when she was younger and still believed that maybe, somehow, her life might matter. The forgotten one will choose life over pride. Bella had no pride. Being invisible had stripped that from her long ago, but she had life, her own small, overlooked life, and she had the power to choose what to do with it. She could choose safety, or she could choose courage. She could choose silence, or she could choose to speak. She could choose to remain forgotten, or she could choose to be remembered. Her decision crystallized in that moment, as clear and sharp as the crystal cup in her hands. She knew what she had to do, knew it with a certainty that went beyond logic or reason, knew it in her bones and in her blood and in her very soul. She would save the king, or die trying. Bella pushed away from the wall and moved through the corridors with purpose, the cup held carefully in her hands. The palace was vast, a labyrinth of halls and chambers that had taken her years to learn, but she knew where the king's private chambers were. Everyone who worked in the palace knew, though few had any reason to go there. Guards stood at regular intervals along the corridors, but they barely glanced at her. A servant carrying a cup of wine was such a common sight that it didn't register as suspicious. Besides, she was just an Omega, invisible and unimportant, not worth their attention. Bella climbed the spiral stairs to the royal wing, her breath coming faster with each step, her courage threatening to fail with every landing. But she pushed forward, driven by something stronger than fear, something that felt almost like destiny itself pulling her along. When she finally reached the corridor that led to the king's private chambers, she paused. Here, the guards would not be so easily passed. Here, she would need to find another way. She waited in the shadows, watching, learning the pattern of the guards' movements. They were thorough but predictable, changing positions every few minutes, their routes taking them past various doors and checkpoints. There was a brief moment when both guards would have their backs to the king's door simultaneously. Bella timed her approach perfectly. When the moment came, she slipped from the shadows and moved quickly to the king's door, her soft footsteps making no sound on the stone floor. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. This was her last chance to turn back. Now, once she knocked, once she drew attention to herself, there would be no returning to her invisible life. She would be noticed, questioned, possibly punished for her presumption in approaching the king without permission. But if she didn't knock, the king would die. The elders would win. The kingdom would fall to corruption and darkness. Bella knocked. The sound seemed impossibly loud in the quiet corridor. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then she heard footsteps inside, heavy and purposeful, approaching the door. It opened. The king's chamber Caesar stood in the doorway of his private chamber, still dressed in his formal attire from the feast. One of his golden eyes narrowed with suspicion as he looked down at the small Omega standing before him with a silver cup in her shaking hands. Behind him, his personal guards moved instantly, hands going to their weapons, bodies tensing for action. "My king," one of them began, stepping forward. "We didn't see her approach." Caesar lifted one hand, and the guard fell silent immediately. The king studied Bella with an intensity that made her want to lower her eyes, to shrink back, to disappear the way she always had. But she forced herself to meet his gaze, forced herself to stand straight, forced herself to be seen. "Let her speak," Caesar said, his voice deep and commanding, a voice that expected obedience and always received it. Bella's mouth went dry. Standing this close to him, she could feel the power radiating from him like heat from a flame, could sense his wolf pressing just beneath his skin, could smell the scent of leather and pine, and something uniquely him that made her own wolf whimper with a mixture of fear and something else she couldn't name. She fell to her knees, the gesture of submission instinctive and necessary. The cup trembled in her hands, the poisoned wine inside it sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "My king," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The wine. It's poisoned." The words hung in the air like a blade. Silence filled the corridor, so complete that Bella could hear her own heartbeat, rapid and terrified. Caesar's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his golden eyes. Calculation, assessment, perhaps a hint of surprise. "Poisoned," he repeated, on his tone flat and unreadable. "And you know this how?" Bella swallowed hard, forcing her voice to strengthen. "I heard the elders, my king, Elder Marcus and Elder Lucius. They spoke of it in the feast hall, believing no one could hear them. They said the poison is undetectable, that it would take effect slowly, that by morning you would be dead and everyone would believe your heart had simply given out." "And why?" Caesar asked, taking a step closer, his presence overwhelming. "Would you risk your life to tell me this? You're just a servant, are you not? This game of power and politics doesn't concern you." Bella looked up at him, and for the first time in her life, she spoke with complete honesty, with no fear of judgment or rejection, because what did any of that matter when faced with murder and conspiracy? "Because it's wrong," she said simply. "Because you're a good king, whether the elders want to admit it or not. Because the kingdom needs you, and because—" She hesitated, then continued. "Because I heard the elders speak of the prophecy with contempt, dismissing it as myth. But I've read the prophecy, my king, in the temple years ago, and I remembered it tonight." "The prophecy," Caesar murmured, and something changed in his expression, a recognition or realization that Bella couldn't quite read. He moved closer still, until he stood directly before her, looking down at her kneeling form. Then, Deliberately, he reached out and took the silver cup from her hands. The guards gasped, moving forward in alarm. "My king, no!" one of them shouted. "If it truly is poisoned—" But Caesar held up his other hand, stopping them in their tracks. His eyes never left Bella's face as he lifted the cup to his lips. Bella's heart stopped. Time seemed to slow. Every instinct screamed at her to knock the cup away, to stop him, to save him from the very danger she had warned him about. But she remained frozen, watching in horror as Caesar drank deeply from the poisoned wine. He lowered the cup and smiled. Not a kind smile. Caesar was not known for kindness, but a smile of grim satisfaction. "The poison was real," he said calmly, his voice showing no sign of distress or pain. "I could taste it beneath the wine. Wolfsbane and nightshade mixed with something else, something alchemical. Quite sophisticated, actually. The elders chose their assassin well." Bella stared at him in shock. "But if it was real, how are you?" Caesar's smile widened slightly, taking on a dangerous edge. "I've been taking small doses of various poisons for years, building immunity. It's a practice I learned from my time in the southern territories, where assassination by poison is an art form. The dosage in this cup would have killed a normal wolf, certainly, but I am not a normal wolf." He handed the cup to one of his guards. "Take this to the royal alchemist. I want it analyzed completely, every ingredient identified." The guard took the cup and hurried away. Caesar turned his full attention back to Bella, and she felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. "You still haven't answered my question," he said softly, and there was something in his voice now that hadn't been there before. Curiosity, perhaps, or something deeper. "Why did you risk yourself to warn me? You could have walked away. No one would have known you heard the elders' plot. No one would have blamed you for staying silent." Bella took a shaky breath. "I couldn't let them kill you. I couldn't—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain the pull she had felt, the certainty that had driven her actions. Caesar studied her in silence for a long moment. Then he reached down and, to the astonishment of his guards and Bella herself, he offered her his hand. "Stand," he commanded gently. Bella placed her small hand in his large one, and the moment their skin touched, something happened. Power crackled between them like lightning. The air itself seemed to thicken and shimmer. Their wolves rose simultaneously, howling in recognition. "Mate," Caesar's wolf whispered in his mind. "Mate," the word echoing with certainty and destiny. Bella gasped, her eyes going wide as she felt it too, the bond snapping into place, ancient and unbreakable, more real than anything she had ever experienced. It felt like moonlight filling her veins, warm and bright and impossibly right. It felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. It felt like destiny. Caesar's expression transformed, the hardness giving way to something resembling wonder. His hand tightened around hers, not painfully but firmly, as if he needed to assure himself that she was real. "The prophecy," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "The forgotten Omega, the one who would choose life over pride, the one whose love would tame the beast." He pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. "You," he said. And it was simultaneously a question, a statement, and a revelation. "It's you." Bella could barely breathe. Her entire world had shifted in an instant, everything she thought she knew about her life and her place in it crumbling away to reveal something completely different underneath. "I'm no one important," she whispered, the old belief still clinging stubbornly despite everything. "I'm just—" "You saved the king," Caesar interrupted, his thumb brushing gently across her cheek. "You risked everything to warn me of danger. You heard a plot that could have destroyed the kingdom, and you chose to act rather than hide. That makes you everything." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers, and Bella felt the full force of their bond flowing between them, his strength and loneliness, her courage and hope. it intertwining and supporting each other like two halves of a whole that had been separated for too long. The prophecy said you would break the poison with your blood and tame the beast with your love, Caesar said softly. But I think you've already begun. In that moment, standing in the corridor outside the king's chambers with guards watching in stunned silence, Bella realized that her life had just changed forever. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer overlooked. She was no longer alone. She was the king's mate, and together they would face whatever darkness came next. The bond awakens. The guards stood frozen, witnessing something they had never expected to see. Their fierce, ein solitary king holding an Omega servant with a tenderness that seemed impossible from someone known only for strength and severity. Caesar seemed to remember where they were, and he straightened slightly, though his hand remained in Bella's. "Leave us," he commanded his guards. "But my king," one of them protested. "The threat is being handled," Caesar finished firmly. "No one will reach this corridor without my knowledge. Go. Inform the captain that there is a situation that requires his immediate attention. Tell him to gather evidence on Elder Marcus and Elder Lucius quietly. I want their chambers searched, their correspondence identified, and their movements tracked, but subtly. I don't want them to know we're aware of their plot yet." The guards bowed and departed, but though Bella could see the reluctance and confusion in their faces. Their king had just discovered a plot to kill him, had just found his mate, and was sending them away to investigate while he remained with an Omega they had never seen before. It must have seemed mad. Perhaps it was, but Caesar seemed to know exactly what he was doing. Once the guards had gone, he led Bella into his private chamber and closed the door behind them. The room was surprisingly spare for a king's private space. A large bed dominated one wall, covered in dark furs and thick blankets. A desk sat near the window, covered with maps and documents. Weapons hung on the walls, swords, axes, daggers, all kept in perfect condition. A fireplace crackled with warmth, and a few comfortable chairs were arranged before it. It was the room of a warrior, not a king who reveled in luxury. Caesar guided Bella to one of the chairs by the fire, then took the seat opposite her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the bond between them humming with energy, both of them trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. "Tell me your name," Caesar said finally. "Bella," she answered, her voice stronger now that they were alone. "Bella Thorne." "Bella," he repeated, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "How long have you worked in the palace?" 5 years, my king, since I turned 16 and presented as Omega. And in all that time, I've never seen you before tonight." It wasn't a question, but Bella answered anyway. "No, my king, you wouldn't have. I'm very good at being invisible." Caesar's expression darkened. "Gee, no one should have to be invisible in their own pack. Tell me about your family." So Bella did. She told him about her parents, about their deaths, about growing up alone in the pack house. She told him about the other Omegas who were courted and desired while she served in the shadows. She told him about learning to listen and watch and remember, about surviving by making herself useful and unremarkable. Caesar listened without interrupting, his golden eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "They overlooked you," he said finally, and there was anger in his voice now, a rage that made his wolf press close to the surface. "They had a treasure in their midst and they treated you as if you were worthless." "I am worthless," Bella said automatically, the old belief rising to her lips before she could stop it. "I have no strong scent, no rare bloodline, no—" "Stop," Caesar commanded, and the word carried such power that Bella's voice died immediately. He stood and moved to kneel before her chair, taking both her hands in his. "Listen to me, Bella. You are my mate, the mate of the Lycan King. That makes you precious beyond measure. Your bloodline is irrelevant. You will start a new one. Your scent doesn't matter. I can smell your soul, and it is beautiful. And your worth?" He squeezed her hands gently. "You were brave enough to risk death to save me. You saw injustice and chose to fight it even when every instinct told you to hide. That is worth more than any noble breeding or omega pheromones." Tears filled Bella's eyes, not tears of sadness, but of something she had never expected to feel. Being valued, being seen, being cherished. "I don't understand why the bond chose me," she whispered. "I'm not special." "The bond is never wrong," Caesar said firmly. "The moon goddess herself decides these things, and she has looked at both of us, a king who trusts no one and an omega who no one sees, and decided we are meant to complement each other, to complete each other." He reached up and brushed away her tears with his thumb. "I have spent my entire life alone, Bella. Even when surrounded by thousands, I have been alone. I have been strong because I had to be, hard because softness meant weakness, isolated because trust meant vulnerability. But you," his voice softened, "you saw me in danger and didn't think about what it might cost you. You just acted. That kind of selfless courage is so rare that I had begun to think it didn't exist anymore." "What happens now?" Bella asked, her heart still racing, but for a different reason now. The bond between them was growing stronger by the moment, their wolves calling to each other, the pull to complete the mating almost overwhelming. Caesar's eyes flashed gold. "Now, I have to decide how to handle the elder's betrayal. But first—" He hesitated, then continued. "First, I need to know if you accept this bond. Because you have a choice, Bella. You always have a choice. The moon goddess may have decided we are mates, but free will still matters. If you don't want this, if you don't want me, I will not force you. I will still protect you, still ensure you're cared for, but I will not claim you against your will." Bella stared at him. This powerful king kneeling before her, offering her a choice that she had never expected to have. Accept the bond with the most powerful alpha in the kingdom, become his Luna, step into a life of responsibility and danger and power beyond anything she had ever imagined? Or refuse, remain as she was, invisible and safe and alone forever? But really, there was no choice at all. Because from the moment their hands had touched, from the instant the bond had snapped into place, Bella had felt something she had never felt before in her entire life. She felt like she belonged. "I accept," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I accept the bond. I accept you." Caesar's expression transformed, joy and relief and hunger all flickering across his features in rapid succession. "Then," he said, while his voice dropping to a low rumble that made her wolf whimper with anticipation, "allow me to properly claim my mate." He stood and lifted her from the chair as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to the bed. What happened next was both tender and fierce, soft and demanding, a claiming that sealed the bond between them in the oldest way known to their kind. When it was over, when they lay tangled together in the sheets with the bond fully formed and glowing between them like a golden thread that could never be broken, Bella finally understood what it meant to be chosen. Not because of her bloodline, not because of her scent, not because of political advantage, but because she was exactly who she was meant to be. And as Caesar held her close, his fierce heart beating against hers, she realized that the prophecy had been right all along. The forgotten one had chosen life over pride, and in doing so, she had found her destiny. The elder's betrayal morning came too quickly. Bella woke in the king's bed, wrapped in his arms, the bond between them singing with contentment. For a moment, she simply lay there, marveling at the impossibility of it all. Yesterday, she had been invisible. Today, she was the king's mate, but reality couldn't be held at bay forever. Caesar stirred beside her, his golden eyes opening to meet hers. "Good morning, my Luna," he murmured, and the title sent a thrill through her even as fear crept in alongside it. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Caesar said, his expression hardening, "we deal with traitors. He rose from the bed and dressed in his formal attire. Black leather and the royal colors, his presence every inch the commanding king. Bella dressed more nervously in a gown that one of the servants had brought while they slept, clearly at Caesar's command. It was beautiful. Midnight blue with silver embroidery, far finer than anything she had ever worn. "You are my mate now," Caesar said, adjusting the collar of her dress with gentle hands. "You will dress as befits your position. This is only the beginning." He led her through the palace corridors, guards falling into formation around them, servants bowing as they passed. Bella could feel the eyes on her, the shock and confusion and curiosity. Who was this Omega that their king had claimed? Where had she come from? What did this mean? They arrived at the council chamber where the elders were already gathered for their morning meeting. The room fell silent as Caesar entered with Bella at his side. Elder Marcus and Elder Lucius were there, looking relaxed and confident, clearly expecting news of the king's death any moment now. The other elders, 5 more of them, ancient alphas who had served for decades, looked merely curious about the king's unusual choice to bring an Omega to a council meeting. Caesar took his seat at the head of the table and gestured for Bella to stand beside his chair. The message was clear. She was not there as a servant, but as someone important. "Good morning, my king," Elder Marcus said smoothly. "We were concerned when you didn't appear at the morning briefing. We hoped nothing was wrong." "Oh, many things are wrong," Caesar said calmly. "But I'm happy to say that my health is not one of them." A flicker of confusion crossed Marcus's face, quickly suppressed. Beside him, Lucius shifted uncomfortably. "I'm glad to hear it," Marcus continued. "And may I ask who your companion is?" "This is Bella," Caesar announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. "My mate, your future Luna." Shock rippled through the room. The elders stared, some with genuine surprise, others, like Marcus and Lucius, with barely concealed horror. "My king," Marcus began carefully, "surely this is rather sudden. A mate is a serious decision requiring careful consideration of bloodlines, alliances." "I require no one's permission to choose my mate," Caesar interrupted coldly. "The bond is formed. The choice is made. She saved my life last night, and in doing so, he proved herself worthy of standing beside me." "Saved your life?" Lucius asked, his voice tight. "From what danger?" Caesar smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "From poison. From assassins who believed themselves clever enough to kill their king and seize power. From traitors who sit in this very room." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. The other elders looked around in confusion and alarm. Marcus and Lucius had gone very still. "That is quite an accusation," Marcus said carefully. "Do you have proof?" "I do," Caesar said. He gestured, and guards entered carrying a silver cup and several documents. This cup contained a poison specifically designed to be undetectable. Wolfsbane, nightshade, and alchemical compounds that would have killed me slowly enough that no one would suspect murder. The royal alchemist confirmed it this morning. He picked up one of the documents. "This is a record of payments from Elder Marcus's personal funds to an alchemist in the lower city, known for his skill in creating poisons. The dates correspond exactly with the preparation time needed for such a complex mixture." Another document. "This is correspondence between Elder Lucius and the leader of the Northern Rogue Packs, the very same packs I was supposedly fighting. It seems the campaign was a setup, designed to weaken me physically and mentally in preparation for the assassination." He laid the documents on the table, looking at each elder in turn. "And most damningly, I have a witness who overheard the entire plot being discussed. My mate, who worked as a servant in the palace and was invisible enough that traitors spoke freely in her presence." Marcus lunged to his feet. "This is absurd! The word of a servant over respected elders?" "The word of my mate," Caesar roared, and his wolf pressed so close to the surface that several of the younger guards took a step back. The word of the woman chosen by the moon goddess herself to stand at my side. The word of someone who risked her own life to save mine when these so-called respected elders plotted my murder. He stood, his presence overwhelming, his power radiating through the room like a physical force. Elder Marcus, Elder Lucius, you are hereby stripped of your titles and positions. You will be exiled beyond the kingdom's borders, never to return. If you are found within our territory again, the penalty will be death. Guards, take them. The guards moved forward, but Marcus wasn't done yet. His face twisted with rage and desperation. "You fool!" he spat. "You think you've won? You think stopping us changes anything? The darkness is rising, Boy King. Forces older than your precious kingdom are stirring, and they hunger for power. Your heirs—" "I have no heirs," Caesar interrupted. Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You will. The prophecy speaks of 4, doesn't it? 4 children born of the overlooked Omega and the warrior king, and every single one of them will be hunted. The darkness will come for them, just as it came for your predecessors, just as it has come for every strong ruler who threatened the natural order. You may have won today, but your children will pay the price." Guards seized him then, dragging him away, still shouting curses and threats. Lucius went more quietly, his face pale with defeat. When they were gone, Caesar turned to the remaining elders. "Let this be a lesson. I will tolerate disagreement. I will listen to counsel, but I will not tolerate betrayal. Is that understood?" The elders bowed their heads in acknowledgement, some more readily than others. "Good. Then let us move forward. I have a Luna to crown, a kingdom to secure, and apparently, according to prophecy, 4 heirs to raise. We have much work to do." He took Bella's hand, and together they left the council chamber, leaving the elders to contemplate their new reality. As they walked through the corridors, Bella finally spoke. "He said the darkness is rising. He said your heirs, our heirs, would be hunted. What did he mean?" Caesar's jaw tightened. "Well, I don't know, but I intend to find out, and whatever comes, we will face it together." He stopped and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "The prophecy speaks of 4 heirs, children born to us, raised by us, who will guard the kingdom from some rising darkness. I won't lie to you, Bella. I don't know what dangers lie ahead. But I promise you this. I will protect you and our children with every breath in my body. Nothing will harm what is mine." Bella squeezed his hands. "Not yours alone. Ours. We protect each other. That's what mates do." Caesar smiled, a real smile this time, full of warmth and love. "Yes, my Luna, that's exactly what mates do." And in that moment, despite the threats and uncertainty, Bella felt a sense of rightness. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The overlooked Omega and the warrior king, just as the prophecy had foretold. The Luna crowned. The kingdom gathered in the great square 7 days later. In that week, news had spread like wildfire. The king had found his mate, a former servant who had saved his life and been revealed as the Omega from the ancient prophecy. The story had grown with each telling, becoming more dramatic and romantic, until Bella barely recognized herself in the tales being shared. Some were skeptical. How could a servant be the Luna? What bloodline did she have? What training? But others remembered the prophecy, and they whispered that perhaps the moon goddess knew better than any of them what the kingdom needed. Caesar had spent the week preparing both the kingdom and Bella for what was to come. He introduced her to the key nobles and officials, showed her the workings of the palace, taught her about the kingdom's history and politics. He was patient and thorough, understanding that she had been given no preparation for this role. Bella learned quickly. Years of listening and watching had taught her more than she realized. She understood the undercurrents of power, the alliances and rivalries, the delicate balance that kept the kingdom functioning. She just needed to learn how to act on that knowledge rather than simply observing it. Now, Standing in the royal chambers preparing for the coronation ceremony, Bella could barely recognize herself in the mirror. She wore a gown of midnight blue velvet, embroidered with silver thread in patterns of moons and wolves. Her hair had been styled in an elaborate arrangement with silver ornaments woven through it. Around her neck hung a pendant with the royal crest, a wolf howling at a full moon. She looked like a Luna. She just didn't quite feel like one yet. "You're shaking," Caesar observed, coming to stand behind her. He was dressed in formal black and gold, his crown already in place, looking every inch the powerful king. "I'm terrified," Bella admitted. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I disappoint you? Disappoint them?" Caesar turned her to face him. "Listen to me. You were good enough when you risked your life to save mine. You were good enough when you stood before me with nothing but courage and truth. You don't become worthy by wearing a crown, Bella. The crown becomes worthy by resting on your head." He kissed her forehead gently. "You are my mate, my Luna, and I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Now come, your people are waiting." They walked together through the palace and out to the great square where what seemed like the entire kingdom had gathered. The square was massive, capable of holding thousands, and today it was packed with wolves of every rank, nobles in their finest clothing, warriors in formal dress, common folk who had traveled from distant villages just to witness this moment. A platform had been erected in the center, decorated with the royal colors and flowers. At the top stood the high priestess, the oldest wolf in the kingdom, keeper of the temple and the prophecy. Caesar led Bella up the steps to the platform, and the crowd fell silent. The high priestess spoke, her voice magically amplified to reach every ear in the square. "Today we witness a moment prophesied centuries ago. When the temple was first built, when the first words were carved into stone, it was foretold that a king of strength would find his match in an omega of courage, that together they would guide the kingdom through darkness and into light, that their love would be tested, their children would be blessed, and their legacy would endure." She turned to Bella. "Bella Thorne, you came to this kingdom as an orphan with nothing. You served in silence, expecting nothing. But when the moment came to choose between safety and righteousness, between silence and courage, you chose to act. In doing so, you proved yourself worthy not just of the king's love, but of the kingdom's trust." The priestess lifted the Luna's crown, a circlet of silver and moonstone that seemed to glow with inner light. "I crown you not because of your bloodline," Caesar said, stepping forward to take the crown from the priestess. His voice carried across the square, strong and certain. "I crown you not because of tradition or political advantage. I crown you because your heart saved this kingdom, because your courage revealed a plot that would have destroyed us, because your love has given me something I never thought to find, a true partner." He placed the crown on her head, and Bella felt a surge of power flow through her, the bond with Caesar intensifying, something ancient and magical recognizing her new role. "I present to you," Caesar called out, "Luna Bella, my mate, your queen." The crowd erupted. Not polite applause or dutiful cheers, but genuine, thunderous celebration. The common folk, who had always admired Caesar for his strength but feared his harshness, saw in Bella someone like them, someone who had been overlooked and ordinary but had risen through merit and courage. The warriors, who respected strength above all else, recognized the bravery it took to stand against powerful elders and risk death to save their king. The nobles, though some were still skeptical, could not deny the bond between king and Luna, could not argue with the prophecy coming true before their eyes. Caesar took Bella's hand and raised it high, and the crowd roared even louder. "My Luna," Caesar said softly, just for her. "My mate, well, my queen." Bella looked out at the sea of faces, thousands of wolves looking to her with hope and acceptance and faith, and she finally understood. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't overlooked anymore. She wasn't alone anymore. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And as the celebration continued around them, as music began to play and the feast was laid out, Bella leaned close to Caesar and whispered, "Whatever comes next, whatever darkness rises, whatever threats emerge, we face it together." Caesar smiled and pulled her close. "Together," he agreed. "Always together." The prophecy had come true. The forgotten Omega had found her king, and their story was only just beginning. The first year. Love and leadership. The first year of Bella's reign as Luna was a time of transformation, not just for herself, but for the entire kingdom. Caesar had ruled with strength and fear, effective but isolating. Bella brought something different: compassion without weakness, understanding without naivety. Together, they formed a leadership style that was both powerful and just, firm but fair. Bella established new programs for orphans, remembering her own childhood struggles. She created training programs for Omegas who wanted to contribute to the kingdom beyond traditional roles. She held regular audiences where common wolves could bring their concerns directly to the crown, something that hadn't been done in generations. At first, the nobles grumbled about the changes, but as the kingdom grew more stable, as contentment spread through the lower ranks, even they had to admit that the overlooked Omega had become a Luna worthy of respect. Caesar watched his mate blossom with pride. She had always been strong. He had seen that from the first moment, but now she had the confidence to show that strength openly. She stood beside him in council meetings, offering insights that he had missed. She negotiated with visiting dignitaries with a skill that surprised everyone. She trained with the warriors, learning to defend herself because, as she said, a Luna should be able to protect her people, not just hide behind them. And through it all, their bond grew deeper. They spent their nights wrapped in each other's arms, sharing dreams and fears, planning for the future. Caesar told her about his difficult childhood, about the betrayals that had made him hard. Bella shared her years of invisibility, the pain of being overlooked, the strength it had taken to remain kind when the world was cruel. They healed each other in ways they hadn't known they needed. And then, on the night of the first full moon after their coronation anniversary, Bella woke with a certainty that changed everything. "Caesar," she whispered in the darkness, her hand finding his. "I'm pregnant." He was instantly awake, his golden eyes glowing in the moonlight. "Are you certain?" "Yes," she said, and she could feel it in her bones, in her blood, in the very core of her being. Our first heir. The prophecy begins to fulfill itself. Caesar pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "A child," he murmured, wonder and fear mixing in his voice. "Our child." "The prophecy spoke of 4, Bella reminded him. 4 heirs who will guard the kingdom from the rising darkness." "Then we'd better make sure the kingdom is strong enough to protect them," Caesar said firmly. "Because I will not let anything harm our children. Whatever that exiled elder was raving about, whatever darkness is supposedly coming, we'll be ready for it." The next morning, Caesar announced the news to the kingdom, and celebration erupted once more. The Luna was with child, the first of the prophesied heirs. It seemed that destiny itself was smiling on the realm. But in the shadows, in the dark places beyond the kingdom's borders, something stirred at the news. Something old, something hungry, something that had been waiting for exactly this moment. The first heir was coming, and so was the darkness. Bella's pregnancy was watched over with intense care. The royal healers monitored her constantly. Caesar rarely left her side, and the entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath waiting for the birth of their future. The months passed slowly, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Bella continued her duties as Luna as long as she was able, refusing to be coddled despite Caesar's protective instincts. She held audiences, attended council meetings, and worked on her various programs for the kingdom's welfare. But as her time drew near, even she had to admit that rest was necessary. The birth took place on a night when the full moon hung heavy and bright in the sky, as if the moon goddess herself was watching over the arrival of the prophesied heir. The labor was long and difficult. Bella's screams echoed through the palace corridors for hours, and Caesar paced outside the birthing chamber like a caged beast, his wolf pressing close to the surface, desperate to protect his mate, but unable to help. Finally, as dawn broke across the kingdom, a cry split the air, strong, fierce, demanding. Their son had arrived. Caesar burst into the chamber to find Bella exhausted but glowing, cradling a tiny bundle in her arms. The baby had thick, dark hair like his father, and when he opened his eyes, they were the same golden color. "Aurelius," Bella said softly. "We'll name him Aurelius." Caesar knelt beside the bed, looking down at his son with an expression of absolute wonder. "He's perfect," he whispered. "He's ours," Bella said, smiling through her tears. The first of 4. And in that moment, holding their newborn son between them, they both felt the weight of prophecy settling more firmly on their shoulders. This child was special. This child was destined for greatness. But with greatness came danger. And somewhere in the darkness, eyes that had been closed for centuries slowly began to open. Aurelius, the fierce firstborn. From the moment of his birth, it was clear that Aurelius was extraordinary. He grew faster than normal wolf pups, his strength evident even as an infant. By 6 months, he was as developed as a 2-year-old. By his first birthday, he could shift into his wolf form, something that usually didn't happen until puberty. His wolf was magnificent. Black like his father's, but even larger, with golden markings along his back that seemed to glow in moonlight. Even as a young child, his presence commanded attention and respect. But it wasn't just his physical gifts that made Aurelius special. He had an innate understanding of battle tactics, a warrior's instinct that couldn't be taught. By age 3, he was training with wooden swords, his movements already showing the grace and power of a born fighter. "He has your warrior spirit," Bella told Caesar, as they watched their young son train with the guards, determination blazing in his golden eyes despite his small size. "And your courage," Caesar replied, wrapping his arm around her. "He's not afraid of anything." But that fearlessness worried Bella. Aurelius was bold to the point of recklessness, always pushing himself harder, always seeking the next challenge. He spoke of hunting rogue wolves and protecting the kingdom, seeing himself as a warrior rather than a child. "He's growing up too fast," Bella said softly, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach where their second child was growing. "The prophecy said our heirs would be blessed with gifts beyond measure," Caesar reminded her. "Perhaps this rapid growth is part of that blessing. He's meant for something important, Bella. We just have to guide him until he's ready." When Aurelius was 3 years old, Bella gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Lyra. Where Aurelius had been born during a regular full moon, Lyra arrived on a rare blue moon, and the moment she entered the world, the birthing chamber filled with a silvery light that had no apparent source. Her arrival was gentler than her brother's had been, was almost serene. And when Bella held her for the first time, she felt a peace wash over her that seemed to emanate from the baby herself. Lyra was her brother's opposite in almost every way. Where Aurelius was fierce and bold, she was gentle and calm. Her hair was lighter than her parents', almost silver in certain lights, and her eyes were a soft gray that seemed to see more than they should. Her wolf, when she first shifted at age 2, was pure white with silver markings, unheard of in their pack's history. But her true gift revealed itself when she was 3 years old. One of the palace guards had been injured in training, a deep wound that the healers said would take weeks to mend and might leave him crippled. Little Lyra had wandered into the healing room, placed her small hand on the wound and closed her eyes. A silver light had poured from her palm. The wound had healed completely in moments. "Moon touched," the high priestess had whispered when she heard the news. "A healer blessed by the moon goddess herself. The second heir carries a gift that could save thousands." Bella had found Lyra afterwards, exhausted and confused by what had happened. "Mama," she had said softly, "I felt his pain, and I just wanted it to stop." "I know, sweetheart," Bella had soothed her, holding her daughter close. "Your gift is beautiful, but you must be careful with it. Not everyone will understand." As the two heirs grew, it became clear that while they were different, they were also perfectly balanced. Aurelius would rush into danger, fierce and protective, and Lyra would follow behind, healing the wounded, calming the frightened, and bringing peace where her brother brought victory. They adored each other, the fierce warrior prince and the gentle healer princess, two halves of a whole. "Two heirs," Caesar said one evening, watching them play in the palace gardens. Aurelius teaching Lyra how to defend herself, Lyra teaching Aurelius how to be gentle with smaller creatures. Two more to come if the prophecy is true. "It's been true so far," Bella replied, her hand resting on her stomach where she could feel the flutter of life. "I don't think it will stop now." She was pregnant again, and this time she carried twins. The prophecy was continuing to unfold, exactly as foretold. And in the darkness beyond the kingdom's borders, something ancient began to move, drawn by the growing power of the prophesied heirs. The countdown had begun. Cassian and Alara, the final heirs. 3 years after Lyra's birth, the twins were born. The labor was the hardest Bella had endured, lasting 3 days and nights. The kingdom held its breath, praying for their Luna's safety. Caesar never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction, offering his strength when she thought she had none left. Finally, on the dawn of the 4th day, the first twin was born. A boy with Caesar's dark hair and Bella's warm brown eyes. They named him Cassian. Moments later, his sister followed, a girl with Bella's delicate features and Caesar's golden eyes. They named her Ilara. Unlike their older siblings, the twins didn't display obvious supernatural gifts at birth. They seemed almost normal, and for a while, some in the kingdom whispered that perhaps the prophecy had been wrong, that only 2 heirs were truly blessed. But as the twins grew, their unique gifts became apparent in subtler, more profound ways. Cassian was brilliant, not just intelligent, but possessed of a strategic mind that could see patterns others missed, predict outcomes before they happened, understand complex problems with ease that seemed almost supernatural. By age 5, he was reading the same military strategy texts that Caesar studied. By 6, he was offering tactical advice that even experienced generals found valuable. He could look at a battlefield map and see not just where the troops were, but where they would be, where they should be, how the entire conflict would unfold. "He sees the whole game board," Caesar said with pride and amazement, after Cassian had pointed out a flaw in their border defenses that no one else had noticed. Not just the current move, but 10 moves ahead, 20 moves ahead. Ilara's gift was harder to define, more mysterious and unsettling than her siblings. She had prophetic dreams that sometimes came true. She could sense things about people, their intentions, their emotions, their deepest secrets. And strangest of all, her wolf, when she finally shifted at age 4, was silver. Not white like Lyra's, but pure metallic silver that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly quality. "Ancient," the high priestess had breathed when she saw Ilara's wolf for the first time. "She carries the blood of the original wolves, the first children of the moon goddess. This hasn't been seen in 1,000 years. This child is touched by destiny itself." Ilara's prophetic abilities grew stronger as she aged. She would wake from dreams crying about things that hadn't happened yet, and then days or weeks later they would come to pass. She knew when visiting dignitaries were lying. She could sense when danger approached the kingdom. It was a heavy burden for such a young child. The visions hurt, she confided to her mother one night after waking from a particularly distressing dream. I see things I don't want to see. I know things I wish I didn't know. Bella held her youngest daughter close, her heart aching. I know, my love. Great power often comes with great pain, but your gift will save many lives. You will prevent disasters that others would never see coming. That's your purpose. I wish I could just be normal, Alara whispered. You are exactly who you're meant to be, Bella assured her. And you're never alone. Your brothers and sister, your father and I, we're all here with you. Whatever burdens you carry will help you bear them. With all 4 heirs now born and growing, the prophecy seemed complete. Bella and Caesar had raised their family, each child blessed with extraordinary gifts. Aurelius, the fierce protector and warrior, strongest of his generation. Lyra, the gentle healer and peacemaker, touched by the moon goddess. Cassian, the brilliant strategist and planner, seeing futures before they arrived. Ilara, the mysterious prophet with ancient power carrying wisdom beyond her years. Together, they would be unstoppable. The kingdom flourished under the combined leadership of Caesar and Bella, supported by the growing strength of their heirs. Peace reigned for years, prosperity spread to every corner of the realm, and the darkness that had been prophesied seemed like nothing more than a distant myth. But prophecies have a way of coming true, and the darkness had not forgotten. It had only been waiting, growing stronger in the shadows, preparing for the moment when the heirs would be old enough to face their destiny. That moment was coming soon, and when it arrived, everything would change. Years of peace and preparation. For several years, the kingdom knew peace such as it had never experienced before. Under Caesar and Bella's leadership, the borders remained secure. The economy thrived. Relations with neighboring kingdoms improved. Rogue packs were either brought into the fold or driven so far back that they posed no threat. The 4 heirs grew and trained, each developing their unique abilities under careful guidance. Aurelius spent his days training with the warriors, his skill with weapons becoming legendary even in childhood. By age 10, he could beat many full-grown warriors in single combat. His wolf form was massive, his strength incredible, his battle instincts flawless. Lyra worked with the healers, learning to control and direct her gift. She could heal almost any wound, cure most diseases, even ease psychological trauma with her gentle presence. But the gift exhausted her, and she had to learn her limits carefully to avoid burning herself out. Cassian spent his time in the war room and the library, studying everything from military tactics to economic theory to diplomatic protocols. He developed elaborate defense strategies, predicted threats before they materialized, and advised his father on matters of state with wisdom that seemed impossible for someone so young. Ilara was the most mysterious of the 4. Her prophetic dreams guided the kingdom in subtle ways, preventing disasters, warning of betrayals, directing resources where they would do the most good. But the dreams were unpredictable, often cryptic, and left her drained and troubled. Despite the differences in their gifts and personalities, the 4 heirs were incredibly close. They protected each other fiercely, supported each other's weaknesses, and amplified each other's strengths. They're stronger together than apart, Bella observed one evening as she watched all 4 of them in the training yard. Aurelius sparring, Lyra ready to heal any injuries, Cassian calling out tactical advice, and Alara sitting quietly to the side, her eyes distant as she watched futures unfold. The prophecy speaks of them as 4 heirs, but perhaps it really means 1 defense, Caesar mused. 4 parts of a greater whole. When they work together, they're practically invincible. But even as peace reigned and the heirs grew stronger, troubling signs began to appear. Caesar received reports of strange occurrences at the borders, villages going silent, travelers disappearing without a trace, creatures emerging from the deep forests that hadn't been seen in centuries, twisted things that looked like wolves but wrong, corrupted by some dark power. "It's starting," Caesar told Bella one night after receiving another disturbing report. "The darkness that Marcus warned about. It's been gathering strength all these years, waiting for the right moment." "When will it strike?" Bella asked, fear clutching at her heart. "Soon," Caesar said grimly. "Our scouts reported seeing a gathering in the wastelands beyond the northern mountains. Dark wolves, rogues from a dozen different territories, all assembling in one place, being organized by someone or something powerful enough to unite them despite their natural tendency to fight each other." "We should tell the children," Bella said. "They need to be prepared." "They've been preparing their whole lives," Caesar replied. "Now it's time to see if preparation is enough." He called a family council the next morning, gathering all 4 heirs in the war room along with his most trusted advisors. "The threat we've been expecting is finally manifesting," he announced without preamble. "Dark forces are gathering beyond our borders. An army is being assembled. And based on the prophecy and Marcus's dying words, we have every reason to believe this army is coming for us. More specifically, for you 4. The heirs listened quietly, their faces serious but not frightened. They had known this day would come. They had been raised on stories of the prophecy, trained for battle and survival since childhood. This was their destiny. "What's the plan?" Aurelius asked, his hand instinctively going to the sword at his side. "We strengthen our defenses," Cassian answered before his father could speak. "We call in allies from neighboring kingdoms. We evacuate border villages and bring civilians within the inner fortifications. We prepare for siege and possibly for extended conflict. We fight," Aurelius interrupted. "We don't cower behind walls and wait for them to come to us. We take the fight to them." "We do both," Bella said firmly, her Luna voice carrying authority that made even Aurelius pause. "We defend our people and we prepare to take offensive action when the moment is right. This isn't about proving our courage, Aurelius. This is about survival, about protecting the kingdom, about fulfilling the prophecy." "Your mother is right," Caesar agreed. "This isn't a game or a test of honor. This is war, real war, and against an enemy that has been planning this for years, possibly decades. We need to be smart, not just brave." "What do I see?" Alara spoke up softly, and everyone turned to her. "I've been having dreams about this for months. The darkness is vast. It's not just an army of rogues. It's something older, something that was sealed away long ago and is now breaking free. It's been using Marcus and others like him, corrupting wolves and building its strength. And when it finally emerges fully..." She trailed off, her young face troubled. "What?" Bella prompted gently. "When it emerges, it will be stronger than anything we've ever faced," Alara continued. "Stronger than a father in his wolf form, stronger than Aurelius, maybe even stronger than all of us combined if we fight separately. But..." She paused, her golden eyes focusing intently. "But if we fight together, if we truly unite our powers the way the prophecy intended, we have a chance, not a certainty, but a chance." "Then we'll take that chance," Caesar said firmly, "because the alternative is watching the kingdom fall to darkness, and that's not acceptable." He looked at each of his children in turn. "You were born for this, raised for this, but remember, you don't face this alone. You have each other. You have your mother and me. You have the entire kingdom standing with you. The darkness may be powerful, but so are we. And we will not surrender. We will not falter. We will fight. And we will win," Aurelius said fiercely. "We must," Lyra added softly. "We will," Cassian said with quiet confidence. "We're meant to," Ilara finished. And in that moment, despite the approaching darkness, and despite the uncertainty and fear, the royal family stood united, ready to face their destiny, ready to fulfill the prophecy, ready to show the world what the children of the overlooked Omega and the warrior king could do. The darkness was coming. but so was the dawn. The rising darkness. The attacks began subtly at first. Border patrols going missing, supply caravans disappearing without a trace, small villages waking to find their livestock slaughtered, strange symbols carved into their doors. Then the attacks grew bolder. An entire border fortress went dark overnight. When reinforcements arrived at dawn, they found every single wolf dead, drained of blood, with looks of absolute terror frozen on their faces. The fortress walls were covered in the same strange symbols that had appeared at the villages, dark magic, older than the kingdom itself. "They're testing our defenses," Cassian said, studying maps of the attacks, "probing for weaknesses, learning our response times and force distribution. This is just the beginning." He was right. Within weeks, sightings increased of the twisted wolves, creatures that looked like their kind but corrupted by dark magic. Their eyes glowed red instead of the natural gold or amber. Their bodies were larger, muscles bulging unnaturally. They moved with jerky, aggressive motions, more beast than thinking being. And they were everywhere, in the forests, in the mountains, even occasionally inside the kingdom's borders, having somehow slipped past the defenses. The people began to panic. Bella worked tirelessly to maintain order, holding audiences, speaking to frightened citizens, reassuring them that the crown would protect them. But even she could see the fear spreading like a disease through the kingdom. Then came the night that changed everything. A messenger arrived at the palace gates, staggering and covered in blood. He collapsed before the guards could catch him, gasping out words that would haunt them all. "They're coming. The elder has returned, and he's not alone." Caesar was summoned immediately. He arrived in the courtyard to find Lyra already there, her hands glowing with silver light as she worked to heal the messenger. Bella stood beside her, and the other 3 heirs had been awakened by the emergency bells. "Where are you from?" Caesar demanded as soon as the messenger could speak coherently. "Thornwick, my king," the man gasped. "The northern border village. They came at sunset, hundreds of them, the twisted wolves, and leading them," his voice broke, "leading them was Elder Marcus, but changed, transformed, no longer truly wolf or truly man, but something else, something dark and terrible." "Marcus is dead," Caesar said flatly. "We exiled him years ago, and our spies confirmed he died in the wasteland." "His body may have died," the messenger said, shaking his head. "But something brought him back, or rather something is wearing his body like a puppet. He spoke with voices, plural, my king, many voices speaking as one, and he said—" The messenger's eyes filled with tears. "He said to tell you that your time of peace is over, that the darkness remembers the prophecy, that your heirs will fall one by one, and the kingdom will bow to the true ancient power." "How many survived at Thornwick?" Bella asked gently. The messenger's silence was answer enough. "I'm sorry," Lyra whispered, her healing light fading as she completed her work. "There's nothing more I can do for his wounds. He needs rest." "Get him to a bed," Caesar commanded. "Then summon the war council. It's time." Within an hour, the palace was in controlled chaos. Warriors assembled, defenses were reinforced, civilians in vulnerable areas were evacuated toward the capital. The kingdom prepared for war. In the royal family's private chambers, Caesar gathered his mate and 4 children. "This is it," he said simply. "The darkness we've been waiting for. It's here, it's real, and it's coming for us." "Cassian, what's our tactical situation?" "Bad, but not hopeless," Cassian replied, already having analyzed every factor. "If we concentrate our forces and choose our battlefield carefully, we can meet them with roughly equal numbers. But those twisted wolves," he hesitated, "they're individually stronger than our normal warriors. We'll be fighting at a disadvantage unless we're on the battlefield," Aurelius finished. "The 4 of us, we can tip the balance." "Your children," Caesar said, though his tone suggested he already knew the argument was lost. We're the heirs of prophecy, Alara countered softly. This is literally what we were born for. The darkness isn't coming for random villages or border fortresses, Father. It's coming for us. If we hide, we just make everyone else die protecting us. If we fight, we at least have a chance. She's right, Bella said, though every maternal instinct screamed against it. I've seen what they can do together in training. When they combine their gifts, they're extraordinary. We need every advantage we can get, and our children are our greatest advantage. Caesar looked at each of his children. Aurelius, fierce and ready for battle. Lyra, gentle but determined. Cassian, calm and analytical. Ilara, young but wise beyond her years. They weren't children anymore. Maybe they never had been. Fine, he said finally, but you stay close to your mother and me. You follow orders. And if I tell you to retreat, you retreat. Understood? All four nodded. Then let's prepare for war, Caesar said, because the darkness may think it's going to destroy us. But it's about to learn what happens when you threaten a pack that stands united. The kingdom mobilized over the next 3 days. Every able-bodied warrior was called to service. Allies from neighboring kingdoms sent reinforcements. The defensive formations were planned and replanned until Cassian was satisfied with every detail. And finally, scouts brought word that the Dark Army was on the move, heading south, heading for them. They'll reach the Fields of Valor by tomorrow night, Cassian reported. If we march out at dawn, we can meet them there on ground of our choosing. Then we march at dawn, Caesar agreed. And we show this darkness that prophecy is not a prediction to be feared. It's a promise to be fulfilled. That night, Bella gathered her children one more time. Whatever happens tomorrow, she told them, on her voice shaking slightly despite her attempts at composure, know that I am so proud of you. All of you. You've grown into exactly who you were meant to be, strong, brave, compassionate, wise. And whatever the outcome of this battle, that will never change. She hugged each of them tightly, memorizing the feel of them in her arms, just in case. We're going to win, Mama, Lyra said softly. I can feel it. Not easily, not without cost, but we will win. How can you be sure? Bella asked. Because we're fighting for love, Lyra replied simply. For family, for home. And that's always stronger than darkness, always. Bella held her daughter close and prayed to the moon goddess that she was right. Because tomorrow they would find out. Tomorrow the prophecy would finally be fulfilled. Or everything they loved would fall to darkness. Chapter 23 to 28, The Battle for the Kingdom. They met the Dark Army on the Fields of Valor, a wide plain 3 miles north of the capital where ancient battles had been fought and won throughout the kingdom's history. Caesar had chosen the location strategically, open ground that favored organized troops over chaotic attackers, close enough to the capital to retreat if necessary, but far enough to prevent immediate threat to civilians. The kingdom's army assembled in perfect formation, 5,000 strong, the best warriors Caesar had trained over the past decade. They stood in disciplined ranks, weapons ready, determination burning in every eye. Across from them, the Dark Army emerged from the northern forests like a nightmare made manifest. The messenger had been right. These were wolves, but twisted into something unnatural. Their bodies were larger than they should be, muscles bulging in grotesque ways. Their fur was patchy and dark, often missing in places to reveal corrupted flesh beneath. Their eyes glowed red with malevolent hunger, and there were hundreds of them, perhaps even 1,000. At their head rode a figure in dark robes on a massive black horse. Elder Marcus, returned from death, transformed by whatever dark power he had bargained with into something no longer entirely wolf or entirely alive. His face was gaunt, skin stretched tight over bone. His eyes were pits of darkness with red flames burning in their depths. When he opened his mouth to speak, multiple voices emerged, layered over each other like a chorus of the damned. "Caesar!" The voices boomed across the battlefield, amplified by unnatural magic. The boy king who thought he could defy tradition. The fool who believed the lies of a dying oracle. We have returned, and we bring with us the true power of this world. Not the weak light of the moon goddess, but the strength of shadow and blood and ancient darkness that predates your pathetic civilization. Caesar sat on his own mount at the front of his army, Bella beside him on her white mare, their 4 children arrayed behind them with their own elite guard units. He didn't shout back, he simply raised his sword. The signal to attack. The 2 armies crashed together like thunder. Aurelius was the first into battle, his massive black wolf form leaping ahead of the front lines with a roar that shook the ground. He tore into the twisted wolves with savage efficiency, his claws and fangs finding throats and hearts with practiced precision. His golden eyes blazed with battle joy, and for a moment, watching him fight, Bella understood why the prophecy had blessed him with such strength. Cassian directed troops from his command position on a small rise, his young voice surprisingly authoritative as he called out tactics and adjustments. 3rd Regiment, reinforce the left flank. Archers, focus fire on the cluster at grid mark 7. 2nd wave, prepare to advance on my signal. Under his guidance, the army fought with incredible coordination, each unit supporting the others perfectly, by adapting to the chaotic nature of the enemy with disciplined efficiency. Lyra moved behind the front lines with teams of healers, her silver light flashing constantly as she worked. She healed the wounded, giving tired warriors the strength to fight on, closing wounds that would have been fatal. Her gift was exhausting, draining her energy with each use, but she pushed through the fatigue, refusing to let any of her people die if she could prevent it. Alara stayed with her mother, and at first, Bella worried that her youngest daughter had no clear role in this battle. But then she understood. Alara's eyes would suddenly glow silver, and she would call out warnings. Left flank! Ambush coming from the tree line! Or, retreat from Sector 3, they've set a trap! Or, Father, us duck now! Her prophetic gift was showing her the battle moments before it happened, giving them a crucial advantage that saved countless lives. And Bella herself fought with a ferocity that surprised many who had only seen her gentle Luna persona. She had trained for years, knowing this day would come, and now she unleashed all that skill and power. Her wolf was smaller than the twisted beasts, but faster, smarter, driven by a mother's protective fury. The battle raged for hours. Despite being outnumbered, the kingdom's forces held their ground. The twisted wolves were fierce but disorganized, their mutations making them strong but also unstable and predictable. The disciplined coordination of Caesar's army, guided by Cassian's tactical brilliance and protected by Lyra's healing, was winning. But then Marcus himself entered the fray. He transformed, but not into a wolf, into something else entirely. Something that looked like a wolf merged with pure shadow, larger than any natural creature, with claws that dripped darkness and eyes that burned with hellfire. His very presence seemed to corrupt the ground where he stepped, grass withering and dying under his paws. He tore through the kingdom's warriors like they were made of paper, each swipe of his claws killing multiple soldiers, his roar shaking the very earth beneath their feet. Caesar met him in single combat, his own massive wolf form charging to intercept. The battle between them was epic. 2 alphas, one fighting for justice and his family, the other corrupted by dark power and ancient grudges. They clashed again and again, evenly matched, neither giving ground. But slowly, inevitably, Marcus's dark power began to overcome Caesar's strength. He was stronger than any natural wolf could be, enhanced by whatever bargain he had made with the darkness. He landed a devastating blow that sent Caesar flying, blood spraying from deep wounds across his chest and shoulder. "No!" Bella screamed, abandoning her own fights and running toward her fallen mate. Marcus turned his burning gaze on her and smiled with too many teeth. "The Luna, how perfect. We'll kill you in front of your children, then kill them one by one while they watch each other die. The prophecy will end in blood and screaming, and the darkness will reign eternal. He lunged toward Bella, claws extended, jaws open, ready to tear her apart. But 4 shapes intercepted him. Aurelius, massive and snarling, taking the first blow meant for his mother. His own claws raking Marcus's corrupted flesh. Lyra, her healing light flaring in a new way, not to mend but to shield, creating a barrier of pure life energy that slowed Marcus's attack. Cassian, calling the entire army to concentrate fire on this single target, coordinating the assault with perfect precision, directing warriors to strike at weak points he could see in Marcus's corrupted form. And Alara, her silver wolf glowing with ancient power, her eyes blazing with prophetic certainty, her voice ringing out with authority that seemed to come from somewhere beyond herself. "The prophecy doesn't end here," Alara declared, her voice carrying across the battlefield despite her small form. "You've forgotten how it truly reads, old wolf. You've forgotten what was written in blood on the temple walls. The heirs don't fall. May the heirs rise." She howled, and her siblings joined her. 4 voices, 4 distinct powers, merging and blending into something greater than their individual gifts. Aurelius's strength, Lyra's healing and protection, Cassian's strategic mind directing them perfectly, Alara's prophetic vision seeing Marcus's moves before he made them. The very air around them began to shimmer with silver and gold light, pack bonds amplifying and connecting their powers in ways none of them had fully understood until this moment. This was what the prophecy had truly meant. Not 4 separate heirs, but 4 parts of one unified defense. Marcus staggered back, his dark power suddenly flickering uncertainly. "What? What is this? This is impossible. You're just children. You shouldn't be able to—" "We're not just children," Aurelius snarled. "We're the heirs of prophecy. Born of the overlooked Omega and the warrior king," Lyra added, her light burning brighter. "Trained and prepared for exactly this moment," Cassian said calmly. "And we will not let you destroy our kingdom," Alara finished. Bella felt something awakening inside her as she watched her children unite their powers. The bond she shared with Caesar, the bonds connecting her to each of her children, and the deeper bond connecting all of them to the moon goddess herself, all of it blazed to life simultaneously. Power surged through her, ancient and pure, the full might of what it meant to be Luna, to be the mate chosen by prophecy, to be the mother of the 4 heirs. She shifted into her wolf form, and as she did, she blazed with light as bright as the full moon itself. "Run," she told Marcus, her voice carrying absolute authority. "Run now. Return to whatever darkness spawned you, and perhaps you'll survive what comes next." But Marcus, driven by arrogance and dark power and centuries of hate, attacked instead. It was the last mistake he would ever make. Bella met him mid-leap, and when they collided, it wasn't a contest. Her light, amplified by her connection to her family and the moon goddess, tore through his darkness like dawn burning away shadows. Her claws found his throat, her jaws closed on his neck. Her very presence seemed to unmake the corruption that held him together. Marcus fell, his dark form dissolving into ash and shadow, his multiple voices screaming in rage and despair before falling silent forever. The battle ended. The twisted wolves, deprived of their master's power, became confused and weakened. Without Marcus's dark magic holding them together, many simply collapsed where they stood, their corrupted forms unable to sustain themselves. The rest broke and ran, fleeing back to the northern wastelands from which they'd come. The kingdom's army stood victorious on the fields of valor, bloodied but unbowed, having faced the darkness and won. But the cost had been high. Hundreds of warriors lay dead or wounded. Caesar's injuries, while not fatal thanks to Lyra's immediate intervention, would take days to fully heal even with her gift. The kingdom's resources were strained, the people traumatized. That night, as the army camped on the battlefield and tended to their wounded, the 4 heirs stood together looking up at the stars, still glowing faintly with the power they had united. "Is it over?" Lyra asked softly, exhausted from hours of healing. "The battle is," Cassian said carefully. "But was this the darkness the prophecy spoke of, or just the first wave?" Alara was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant as visions flickered through her mind. Then she spoke, and her words sent a chill through them all. Marcus wasn't the darkness. He was just a servant of it, a puppet. The real darkness, it's still out there, watching, waiting, learning from this defeat, and when it comes again, she trailed off, shaking her head. "Then we'll face it when it comes," Aurelius said firmly, though even his confidence was shaken. "Together, just like today." "Together," Lyra echoed. "Together," Cassian agreed. "Always together," Alara finished. They clasped hands, the four heirs, understanding for the first time the true weight of their destiny. This wasn't just one battle to be won. This was an eternal struggle between light and darkness, and they were meant to stand as guardians against it. For now, they had won. The kingdom was safe. Their family was intact. But as Alara's visions had shown, the true darkness was still out there. And someday, it would return. The thrilling epilogue. 20 years later. When darkness returns, 20 years passed. The Battle of the Fields of Valor became legend, sung in ballads and told in stories across the kingdom and beyond. Caesar and Bella ruled wisely into their later years, beloved by all, their names synonymous with justice, courage, and the triumph of love over darkness. The four heirs had grown into remarkable adults, by each taking on roles that served the kingdom while preparing for whatever future threats might arise. Aurelius, now 32 years old, commanded the kingdom's armies with unmatched skill. He had married a fierce warrior from the eastern territories named Sarah, and together they had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, who showed every sign of inheriting their father's extraordinary strength and battle prowess. Lyra had become the kingdom's high healer and spiritual leader, her gentle wisdom guiding the pack through difficult times. Her healing gifts had saved thousands over the years, and she had trained dozens of apprentices in the healing arts. She had chosen not to marry, dedicating her life instead to service, though many had sought her hand. Cassian served as his father's second, essentially running the day-to-day operations of the kingdom with his brilliant tactical mind. He had married a brilliant scholar from a neighboring kingdom named Elena, and their 2 children, a son and a daughter, were already showing signs of inheriting their father's strategic genius. And Alara had married a kind beta named Marcus, a name that had given the family pause, but the man himself bore no resemblance to the corrupted elder except in name. She had 3 children, 2 sons who seemed to have inherited prophetic abilities, and a daughter whose silver wolf marked her as special even among the heir's descendants. The kingdom had grown prosperous and strong. New alliances had been forged. Technology and culture had advanced. The borders were secure, trade routes protected, and the people happy. But on this night of the red moon, the first blood moon in 20 years, Alara woke with a start in her chambers, her heart pounding, cold sweat beading on her skin. Her prophetic gift, which had become so reliable over the years that she could usually interpret her visions clearly, was screaming at her with an urgency she hadn't felt since she was a child preparing for the Battle of the Fields of Valor. She rose from her bed, careful not to wake her husband, and moved to the balcony of their quarters in the palace. The red moon hung heavy in the sky, its crimson light casting everything in shades of blood and shadow. And in her mind, the vision played out with terrifying clarity. Far beyond the northern mountains, past the wastelands where Marcus's corrupted army had once gathered, in places so remote that no civilized wolf had ventured there in centuries, something was stirring. Not the same darkness they had defeated. This was different, newer, but no less dangerous. She saw wolves with eyes that burned not with red flame but with golden fire, the color of sunlight, of ambition, of power that mimicked the divine without understanding its true nature. She saw them gathering, thousands of them, led by a figure whose face she couldn't quite make out, but whose power was undeniable, terrifying, vast. She saw them moving south, toward the kingdom, toward her family, toward everything her parents and siblings had fought so hard to protect. And she saw something else, something that made her blood run cold and her wolf howl in distress. Her own children, her nieces and nephews. The next generation of the prophetic bloodline, 9 children in total, ranging in age from 5 to 15, each showing signs of inheriting gifts from their parents and grandparents. They were the targets. A voice echoed through her vision, beautiful and terrible, carrying authority that made her knees weak. The first darkness was defeated by the heirs of prophecy. But they did not understand. There is no beginning or end in the eternal war between light and shadow. There is only the cycle, endlessly repeating. One darkness falls, another rises, stronger and wiser for having observed the previous failure. The heirs of the overlooked Omega and the warrior king were strong, but strength is not passed down unchanged through generations. Let us see if their children inherited the same power. Or if the blood has grown thin with comfort and peace. Let us see if prophecy can repeat itself, or if this time, when tested by greater fire and deeper shadow, the line will finally break. This time, we will not attack directly. We will not give them the chance to unite their powers. We will divide them, corrupt them, turn them against each other, and then, when the family is shattered from within, the kingdom will fall, and the reign of eternal night will finally begin. Elara gasped and pulled back from the vision, her whole body trembling. Behind her, she heard footsteps, her siblings drawn by some instinct, some pack bond that told them she was in distress. "Elara?" Lyra asked gently, placing a hand on her sister's shoulder. "What did you see?" Elara turned to face all 3 of her siblings. They were older now, marked by scars from the battles they had fought, wiser from the responsibilities they had carried. Gray touched Cassian's hair at the temples. Fine lines creased Aurelius's face around his eyes. Lyra's healing work had left her looking more ethereal than ever, almost translucent in the moonlight. But in that moment, Elara saw them as they had been, 4 children standing together against impossible odds, drawing strength from their unity. They would need that strength again. Their children would need it even more. "The darkness was never destroyed," Elara said quietly, her voice shaking. "We didn't understand. How could we? We were so young. The darkness we fought, Marcus and his corrupted army. It wasn't the darkness. It was a darkness. One manifestation of something much larger, much older, a much more persistent." "Explain," Cassian demanded, his tactical mind already racing through implications. "There's an eternal war between light and shadow," Elara continued. "Not metaphor, not philosophy. Literal, actual forces that have been battling since before recorded history. Every few generations, the darkness grows strong enough to threaten the world, and heroes rise to stop it. We stopped one manifestation, but we didn't end the cycle. We didn't break the pattern. We just delayed it. And now it's rising again," Aurelius said, his hand instinctively going to the sword he still wore even in the palace at night. "How long do we have?" "Months," Elara said. "Maybe a year. It's gathering strength quickly, learning from Marcus's failures, adapting its strategy. And this time," she hesitated, her voice breaking slightly. "Well, this time it's not coming for us. It's coming for our children." Silence fell over the balcony, heavy and suffocating. All of them were parents now. All of them had children, the next generation of the prophetic bloodline. Young, still developing their gifts, vulnerable in ways that the original heirs had never been because they'd been raised specifically for battle. These children had been raised in peace, in prosperity, in a kingdom that seemed safe. How could they possibly be ready for what was coming? "Then we train them," Aurelius said firmly, breaking the silence. "The way Father trained us. We prepare them for what's coming. We don't hide the truth from them. We arm them with knowledge and skill." "And we fight beside them," Lyra added, though her gentle voice was pained. "We don't let them face this alone. We stand together. Guess all of us, the original heirs and the new generation." "We also need to learn more," Cassian said, his mind already forming plans. "If this is a cycle, if this has happened before throughout history, then there must be records, knowledge, wisdom from previous generations who faced similar threats. We need to research, to understand what we're really dealing with and how others survived it." "I'll consult the ancient texts in the temple," Ilara agreed, "and I'll push my visions deeper, try to learn more about this new threat's nature, its weaknesses, its goals. But," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "we should tell Mother and Father. They deserve to know, and we need their wisdom." The four heirs made their way through the palace corridors to their parents' chambers. Despite the late hour, both Caesar and Bella were awake. Perhaps their own instincts had warned them that something was wrong. Caesar was now in his 60s, his dark hair gone silver, but he was still powerfully built, still carried himself like the warrior king he had always been. Bella's face showed her age in lines of wisdom and care, but her eyes were still bright, still sharp, still filled with the courage that had once driven an overlooked Omega to save a king. "You've had a vision," Bella said to Ilara. It wasn't a question. She knew her daughter too well. "Yes," Ilara confirmed. "And it's, Mother, Father, the darkness is rising again, a new darkness stronger and more cunning than Marcus ever was, and this time it's targeting the grandchildren." She explained everything she had seen, holding nothing back. When she finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Caesar stood, and despite his age, he looked every inch the king who had once conquered a kingdom and defended it against impossible odds. "Then we face it as we've faced everything else," he said firmly. "Together, as a family, as a pack, with courage, love, and the strength that comes from never giving up hope." Bella rose beside him, her bearing still regal, her presence still commanding. "You were our hope once," she said to her four children. "You saved the kingdom when you were barely more than children yourselves, and now your children are the kingdom's hope. But remember what we learned all those years ago. Hope isn't fragile. It's the strongest force in the world. Because as long as we have hope, as long as we believe that tomorrow can be better than today, the darkness can never truly win." She looked at each of her children in turn, seeing them not as the powerful adults they had become, but as the young heirs who had stood beside her in battle, ready to sacrifice everything to save their kingdom. "The prophecy didn't end with you," she said softly. "It continues through your children, through every generation that chooses courage over fear, love over hate, light over darkness. That's the true meaning of prophecy, not a single moment of victory, but an eternal commitment to standing against the night." Caesar placed his hand on Bella's shoulder, and together they looked at their children and felt the bonds of family and prophecy and love that connected them all. "Let the darkness come," Caesar said, his voice still strong despite his years. "Let it test us again. Yeah, let it try to break our family, corrupt our children, destroy our legacy. We'll be ready, because we've been ready before and we'll be ready again. That's what it means to be the heirs of the overlooked Omega and the warrior king." "We'll always be ready," Bella agreed. And far beyond the palace walls, far beyond the kingdom's borders, far in the deep places where darkness gathered and ancient powers stirred, golden eyes opened, hundreds of them, thousands, like stars in a malevolent sky. A voice spoke, beautiful and terrible, shaking the mountains themselves. "Let the game begin." And in the palace, young Ilara's daughter woke from her own dream, her silver wolf stirring restlessly. At only 8 years old, she already carried visions in her mind, already understood that she was meant for something greater. She went to her window and looked out at the red moon, sensing something her parents and grandparents couldn't yet feel, the true scope of what was coming, the real nature of the eternal war they were all part of. "They're going to need us," she whispered to her wolf. "All of us, the new generation, because this darkness is different, it's smarter, and it knows our every weakness." Her wolf rumbled in agreement. "But it doesn't know our strength," the girl continued, a small smile crossing her face, a smile that was equal parts her grandmother Bella's courage and her grandfather Caesar's fierce determination. "It doesn't know that we're more than just descendants of prophecy. We are the prophecy continuing. And prophecy doesn't end. It evolves. It grows. It becomes stronger with each generation." She closed her eyes and felt the connections to her parents, to her aunts and uncles, to her cousins, to her grandparents, all the way back through the bloodline to the very first Omega who chose life over pride and changed everything. "Let them come," she whispered, echoing her grandmother's words from years before. "We'll be ready." The night continued. The red moon slowly crossed the sky, and in the palace of the Lycan Kingdom, 3 generations of a prophetic bloodline prepared for the war that was coming. A war that would test everything they were and everything they believed. A war that would either prove that love and courage could endure forever, or show that even prophecy could fail. But as dawn approached and the red moon finally set, as the family gathered together in the great hall to begin planning their defense, as children and parents and grandparents stood united, one thing became clear. The darkness might be eternal. But so was hope. And as long as the line of the overlooked Omega continued, as long as courage chose to stand against fear, as long as love fought against hate, the light would never die. The story wasn't over. The cycle continued. The prophecy endured. And somewhere, written in blood on temple walls that had stood for centuries, new words were appearing, carved by invisible hands, spoken by the moon goddess herself, adding to the original prophecy. When darkness rises in new forms, when hope seems lost and courage breaks, remember, prophecy is not a moment, but a legacy. Not one generation, but an eternal flame. The heirs will rise again and again and again. For love is the most powerful magic, and family is the strongest shield, and together they are invincible. The end and the beginning.